And tonight on Coast to Coast, we talk about the archons in ancient history. One of the classics, John Lash, joins us. One of his books, Not in His Image, the other, The Seeker's Handbook. Back with John in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Hey, welcome back to Coast to Coast. John Lash is a mythologist, an author, visionary teacher. Now, he's known for his unique approach to the baffling question of our purpose. Regarded by many as the direct heir of Joseph Campbell, John puts into practice the creative mythology that Campbell theoretically tried but didn't, in fact, achieve. And what he calls directive mythology, John presents techniques and guidelines for harnessing the power of myth so that it directs your imagination toward the very sources of life itself. Stand by. Here's John Lash on Coast to Coast, live from Belgium. John, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, George. Good to be on the program again.
It's been a long, long time. What have you been up to?
Oh, I've had quite a few adventures since last we talked. It's an adventurous time for us on the planet here.
Yeah, it really is. And I trust the adventures have taken you to many far-out places?
Well, all my adventures lead me back really to the same place, to the same focus, which for me is the living earth itself. What some people would call, in mythological terms, George, old-fashioned as it may be, the goddess, the mother goddess,
yes,
our Mother Earth. And I find that in my life, in my investigations, and my mystical experiments, if you will, that they all lead me into a deeper intimacy with the living reality of the planet. So that's what my adventures do for me.
I've always thought that the planet, John, is alive, an organism all by itself. Am I off or am I pretty close?
Well, that is not exactly such a wild view. In fact, if you look back in human history, not too long ago, if you go back before, say, the age of the Enlightenment, around 1650, the Western period of the Enlightenment, you'll find that the view of the world that prevailed almost everywhere was animism. That is to say that people in all countries, in all cultures, naturally saw the world, the planet, as animated, that is to say, alive. Now, we've come back to that conception now. It was kind of destroyed and threatened by the rise of materialistic science. Because materialistic science would say, well, the earth is inert, matter is dead, matter is not intelligent, you cannot communicate with the earth. And with the so-called Gaia hypothesis, and you know what that is for sure, we're kind of returning to this notion of an animated planet, a superorganism.
I believe that, too. And a lot of people are beginning to become more and more aware of it, too, aren't they?
They certainly are, and what's wonderful about it is it's not merely a belief. Animism, as I said in my book, Not in His Image, is not the belief that nature is alive and animated, but it is the direct perception.
Well, that's a good point. And how's the reception been to this new work?
Well, Not in His Image is a challenging book. It's a really, you as yourself, as a trailblazer in many areas of information and knowledge, would understand that a truly original and trailblazing idea often meets considerable resistance, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure does. It sure does.
What is it they say, the three stages of truth? First it's ridiculed, and then it's argued, and finally it's accepted as obvious or something like that?
And hopefully sooner than later, right?
Yeah, because time is running out for the species. No, my book is building. It's building, and it's holding very well in sales, and it's building interest. And I can say that over here in Europe, it's come out in French. It's coming out soon in Spanish. And just about in mid-February, it came out in Italian, actually.
When we talked 4 years ago, were you in Belgium then?
Well, I think I was here because I have a landline here, And I visit frequently Belgium. I don't always live here. I actually travel around Europe quite a bit. Yeah,
Okay.
I was speaking from the same phone. That's right.
Okay. All right. Very good. You have introduced the term you did some time ago, archons. And are we talking about gods or rulers? What was your definition?
Well, I'm really glad you asked this question, because I do take credit for that. I did introduce the word archon into the global conversation 10 or maybe even 12 years ago.
Right.
And since then, as you know, this word has become used massively by many, many people. But you see, you asked me what my definition of the archon is. Well, I don't have one, George. The way that I defined archon from the moment I introduced it was not according to my definition. That is to say, not according to some idiosyncratic notion that I might have. But it was a definition true to the ancient source materials where that word is found. And what concerns me today, in a way I'm pleased that millions and millions of people are using this word archon because it can be a tool of knowledge of singular importance. But I'm concerned that people use it in a reckless way, and they use it carelessly because they don't refer back to the original sources of its definition.
Well, in that definition, I think, is probably critical. Even David Icke is using it now, isn't he?
Yes, I know. David Icke had started using it. The definition is very critical because this is special intel. I call it mystery intel. You can put a capital M on mystery because mystery, or mysteries, the plural, refers to the ancient sources of that term. I found that term in certain writings that remain, which are derived from the so-called mysteries of the pre-Christian world and the pagan world going back, at least 1,600 years ago, and then with a long, long tradition before that. Now, in these mysteries, which were organizations of spiritual education, experiment, and training, hence they're sometimes called the mystery schools,
right.
The teachers of those schools had a very particular fix on this archon thing, this archon entity. And I can tell you that they defined it in three ways. There was a threefold definition, and this definition is not mine. This comes directly from the source materials.
And what are they?
Well, in the first place, they did explicitly, as you know, define it as an extraterrestrial predatory entity.
That's right.
You know that. And that is commonly the way the word is used today, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Sure would. And you know what? They might be right on that one.
Well, these writings, these source materials from the mysteries, which I'm citing, which are in Greek and Coptic language, actually profile these archon as ET predators very, very vividly. And as I've said before, I think we covered this in the first interview I did with you. The ancient sources described that there are two primary types of this archon predator. There is the embryonic or neonate type. Imagine a prematurely born fetus that has a large head and spindly limbs. Well, of course, this is a description of the gray ET.
That's right.
Of Whitley Strieber. And they included in the profile a second type, which is a more vicious and aggressive type that may be considered to be the overlord of the gray ETs, who are kind of like drones, And that type is the draconic, D-R-A-K-O-N-I-C, or reptilian type. So it's pretty amazing, I think, that we find the profile of the gray ET and the reptilian types in this ancient material. So that's just one aspect of the definition of archon. It gets even better. It gets better than that.
Don't hold back.
The second thing that can be learned from these ancient sources was that the seers and the shamans of the mysteries who call themselves teleste, meaning we who are aimed, we who have a purpose, we who are aimed. These accomplished shamans looked closely at this archon entity. They investigated its source, how it appears in the cosmos, how it happens to intrude upon the human species, what is its MO, what's its agenda. And one of the things they determined about these archons is that they can be called rulers or authorities because they wish to rule over humanity. They wish to dominate us and enslave us. But there's a subtle nuance here to get at the beginning. They are not our rulers and authorities over us. They wish to be. I mean, you got to get that difference.
Have they tried?
Yes, they have tried, and the ancient seers pointed out how they tried. They pointed out what the archons have done and the tools that the archons use to take over human reality on this planet. One of those tools is religious belief systems. They work through religion. And as a matter of fact, one of the startling revelations of these Nag Hammadi materials, and you're familiar with them, of course,
yes.
Many guests on your show have referred to them, including me. One of the startling revelations about these Nag Hammadi materials is that they tell us, they warn us, that the archons have introduced into the human mind a delusional belief system under the cover of religion, specifically under the cover of Judeo-Christian religion of salvation. So actually what they say is that the Judeo-Christian religion of salvation is a foreign implant in the human mind. It is a virus. Implanted for a specific purpose? Yes, because through that Judeo-Christian belief system of salvationism, and I'll define in a minute what I mean by that, the humanity can be enslaved by these extraterrestrial powers. Now, by the way, we looked at one aspect of the archons, which is they are actually entities living in the solar system with us, but not entities of the Earth. They don't belong to the Earth. They are extraterrestrial. They can't live on the Earth.
And they're
physical? They intrude upon our world through this mental or ideological virus of religion. I've explained this all in my book, as you know.
Yes, you have. And they're physical as opposed to dimensional, aren't they?
They are physical, but they do not physically inhabit our world. In fact, they are inorganic entities, similar to those described by Carlos Castaneda. And as inorganic entities, they have primarily a composition of mercury and silicon base. And because they are inorganic, like any inorganic material, like iron will rust, metal will rust in the presence of oxygen, right?
Yes.
Oxygen is toxic to these archon entities. So it is, again, a concern to me that people talk about the archons. They don't really follow the intel of the mystery schools, and people make the rash claim that the archons can invade our planet and take it over. They can't. They can't live in the oxygen-rich atmosphere of this planet.
That's good. John, hold on for a sec. We're going to be back more on Coast to Coast AM. And our special guest, John Lash, with us, not in his image. Fascinating about the ancient mystery schools, the archons, more to come on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. We're with John Lash, his latest book, Not in His Image. John, tell me a little bit about this project you're working on, the Gaian navigational experiment. What is that?
Well, the Gaian navigation experiment is kind of like a project to restore and recreate in a modern form the system of knowledge and mysticism of these ancient mysteries. It's kind of like, in a way, a return or revival of the mysteries. And to center or focus this experiment, the Gaian navigation experiment, I focus it on one single idea. You could say this is like a challenge, is to say, could we go back to those ancient mysteries and look at the sources that remain, the textual sources,
Mm-hmm.
could we then select and focus on the central message of those ancient teachings and bring it forward today and reapply it, but to redevelop it actually in a new form that suits humanity today? This is the challenge behind the Gaian navigation experiment. And I'd like to mention that anyone who is interested in how that experiment is set up and how it's operating can go to the site called GaiaSpora.org, GaiaSpora.org. That is the teaching site for the Gaian navigation experiment. And that page was set up by my team, my crew as I call them, who are pursuing the Gaian navigation experiment with me. And it's a beautiful portal into the various aspects of this experiment.
What would you like to accomplish with the experiment, John?
Oh, that's a really great question. Well, you know, there's a remarkable clue in the ancient wisdom teachings that survive from these mystery schools, a remarkable clue. And you could say that the Gaian navigation experiment is, in a way, an attempt to follow out this clue. It really relates very closely to the problem of the archons we were discussing. In fact, I probably should just go back and pick up one more aspect of the archon profile in order to answer your question properly. Would it be okay if I do that?
Sure, absolutely.
You know, you'll find something, and I want to ask the people, many people out there who are listening right now, who've heard the use of the word archon, think about what they've actually heard. Because the one thing that's missing, and this really concerns me, is that when people pick up that word now, they do not refer back to the source material that actually tells you how the archons originated. So, for instance, you know, it's interesting that David Icke has picked up this word, and certainly millions of people listen to David Icke. But as far as I know, David Icke has not said what the ancient materials tell us about how the archons came to be in the first place. And this particular piece of intel is the basis of the Gaian navigation experiment. It actually posits, or it actually presents a relationship, get this, between the living Earth Mother, the intelligence of Gaia, and the archons. These two things are very closely related, intimately related.
There's no doubt about that. Now, also, you know the work of Zecharia Sitchin?
Yes, I do.
Does that echo any of this? Because, you know, he's talked about some unfriendly visitors who helped seed us.
That's right. Well, Zecharia Sitchin's work is important because it's a great exercise in discernment and discrimination for those who want to, A, see who the archons really are and what they're doing to humanity, and B, well, even more importantly, for those who want to enter into the intelligence of the earth and to collaborate with the living wisdom of the earth. It's very important to realize that Zecharia Sitchin's message is a message of disinformation. And actually, you could consider that Sitchin told the humanity the lie that the archons want humanity to believe. And that lie is that they are our creators. The archons did not create us. The Mother Earth, Sophia, created us.
Explain that.
The materials of the ancient mystery schools have made it very clear that there is a cosmology. There is a planetary cosmology of our planet. And so the same seers and shamans in those mystery schools who informed humanity about the archons also told us about the origin of the human race. And this intel needs to be considered together. You can't break it up into parts. It's an entire set of intel. So what the mystery school seers said, plain and simple, was that the genome of the human race, which they call the anthropos, was designed in the galactic center. That is to say, in the core of the galaxy in which the Earth and the solar system are now located. And they said that in that core of the galaxy, which they call the Pleroma, there are gods, God beings, which they called aeons. And they said that these aeons, in particular two of them, one who was called Sophia and the other who was called Vliete, actually were like scientists and artists who designed the human genome, the human creature.
That's right.
And then they allowed that genomic plasm to be propagated out in the galactic arms and to arise in different worlds and different planetary systems so that it could develop. And that was their divine experiment, because that's what the gods do. They set up divine experiments, and then they watch how these experiments unfold. Now, I don't know how that particular information comes across to you right now, but I can tell you that in the intelligence community of the ancient mysteries, this was their primary subject of interest.
Were they happy with the end result? Us?
Well, very good question again, George. See, the end result is not yet achieved. You see, what they watched, what the seers watched was they watched how the human experiment, or the divine experiment in humanity, let's call it that, how it unfolded. And one of the things they observed was that it's already unfolded on a number of planetary systems before this one.
I believe that.
Huh?
I believe that.
That's not surprising, is it?
No.
Is it surprising to say that not only are we not alone in this galaxy? Hey, let's just talk about this galaxy for a while, okay? Our own backyard before we go out to other galaxies. Are we alone in this galaxy, which consists of 300 billion stars, many of which can support Earth-like planets? Do you think that we're alone?
Heck no.
Obviously not. And not only that, it's even better. There are other strains of humanity, well, they all originate from this primary genomic plasm, but there are other strains of humanity, that is to say, people just like you and me, living on other planets in this galaxy. And so there are a number of variations of the divine experiment with humanity.
And do most experts in this arena, and there aren't too many, do they all believe this?
No, they don't believe anything like what I'm saying, and they don't even have a concept of what I'm saying, nor would they be able probably to comprehend what I just told you. And there's a reason for that is very clear. Those scholars, there's a book. It's called the Nag Hammadi Library in English. Have you ever seen this book?
I haven't seen it. I've heard about it, of course.
Right. People cite it all the time, don't they?
Yes.
Well, of course they do. Because this book, which appeared in 1976, from a team of scholars in Claremont, California, led by James Robinson, was the definitive English translation of these Coptic and Greek writings that were found in Egypt in 1945, okay?
Were they
astounding? So it's called the Nag Hammadi Library in English. There's a huge problem. This is the source material that I'm drawing from, but there's a huge problem with this source material and the people who translated it. First of all, they are scholars and historians of religion from the Judeo-Christian tradition. They have interpreted the mystery school teachings through the filter of Judeo-Christianity. Well, there's a big problem there, because the mystery school teachings were pre-Christian and in many respects anti-Christian and anti-Judaic. These Nag Hammadi writings are the writings of heretics, religious heretics, who were against the Christian belief system of salvation and the paternal Father God and the Messiah and the Apocalypse and all that. And so how is it possible that these scholars could have presented to the world a fair and accurate translation of these materials? They did not. I am the only scholar of the Nag Hammadi materials, and by the way, I was born on the week and probably the day these materials were discovered, if you like coincidences. I'm the only scholar who represents them from the point of view of the people who wrote them. And so when you represent and develop these source materials from the viewpoint of the pagan mystery school teachers and shamans, then you get the scenario that I am giving you now. But you're not going to find it from these other scholars who have their blinders on, their religious and ideological blinders.
Why don't they accept this?
I don't think they're interested in it, frankly, George. I think that the scholars, apart from myself, because I'm the only self-declared pagan, John Lash is a pagan. What does that mean? I'm the self-declared experimental mystic. It's like, I'll just give you a really stupid example. But suppose that someone gave you a manual on how to play golf. Okay?
I'm not sure it would help me.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you play golf? I don't know, George.
No, I used to hack a long time ago.
Right.
But,
imagine someone gave you quite a technical manual on the ins and outs of golf with all golfing terms and diagrams, and you didn't know what golf was. Wouldn't you be puzzled reading this manual?
I don't think I'd understand it if I didn't know what it was.
Right. The scholars, the religious scholars, the experts in the Coptic language who have translated these precious materials, which contain the very birthright of humanity, pointing us to our origins, our divine origins, are not mystics. I am a self-confessed mystic. So I can interpret material that is written by mystics and comes directly out of the intimate sanctuaries of the ancient mystical tradition, because I am myself a mystic. But they can't interpret it, and I don't think they're interested. They're only interested in the Nag Hammadi writings as they kind of reflect on maybe various aspects of early Christianity.
Right. And are those writings very accurate, in your opinion?
Those writings are a bunch of gibberish, and like the notes of some college student attending a professor's lectures who scribbled down various notions but didn't really totally even understand the lectures, but then in some places did understand them. The Nag Hammadi writings, as I've said before, and I stand by this, are written in a pseudo-language, which is Coptic, which is not a real language. It's like stenography.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, John, when we come back. And we're with John Lash. He is live in Belgium. His work, Not in His Image. Let's get back into the Nag Hammadi. And you say it's a bunch of gibberish, but explain a little bit more about that.
Well, the way it's been translated comes across as gibberish. But actually, there are precious gems of wisdom in this material. And to anyone who is drawn to that material, I suggest you go to my site, metahistory.org, and there's a guide to reading the Nag Hammadi materials, which would be helpful to get to the core of what is in these materials. And I'd like to just take a moment to say what that is and to make it crystal clear to the many people who are listening to us right now. The Nag Hammadi materials contain the unique expression of the Sophianic message for humanity that is not found in any other myth or any other source materials, to my knowledge. I am a comparative mythologist, so that means that, like Joseph Campbell, I have looked at many myths from different cultures around the world, and I have compared these myths. So I've made an inventory of different myths that explain the origin of the human species or things like that, big questions, what is human purpose, so forth. And I can tell you, and this is not an opinion, this is a fact, that the myth of the Goddess Sophia, who is the source of our life and the source of this planet, that is contained in those Nag Hammadi materials is totally unique. There is no other myth like it in this world. It is the single coherent planetary myth that humanity has. And it can be found, the elements of that myth can be found in the Nag Hammadi writings. And what I did in Not in His Image, and also on metahistory.org, is I restored that myth the way someone might restore, say, a mosaic that was damaged.
Right.
Yeah, I restored that myth. I'm the only scholar who has restored it in 9 episodes. And that myth, by the way, a myth, as I use it, is not a lie or an illusion. It is simply a story form that encodes truth and encodes knowledge. This myth encodes the knowledge of human origins, the origin of the earth itself, the origin of the archons, the difficulty of human deviation from nature, the difficulty of the problem of the sexes, and many other aspects of the human experiment. And it is the only myth, to my knowledge, the only sacred narrative that does so.
How closely, John, does it echo the Bible, if at all?
It doesn't echo the Bible at all. Not at all. It's completely different. And as a matter of fact, the scholars and seers, they were also educators and great teachers, the authors of the Nag Hammadi material, were very opposed to the biblical story of creation and the idea that Adam and Eve transgressed the rules of the Father God and that they would need to be punished, and that there is a chosen people, which is master race theory in the Bible, in case you're wondering where it originated, that there is a master race or chosen people, and that the Father God sends the Messiah, and that everyone will be judged at the end of time. All of this that you find in the Bible is completely alien to the Sophianic message for humanity. The Sophianic message is a message of beauty, it's a message of power, it's a message of empowerment of our innate intelligence and our gifts, and it's entirely different, and it is the one single message that can overcome the toxic indoctrination of Judeo-Christian religion. And the people who presented this message for us, those teachers of the mystery schools, they knew that. They knew that it was the single teaching for humanity that could free us to our own true destiny as a species, and that they opposed the teaching of the Bible and of the Messiah and all that jazz.
These authors of the Nag Hammadi, specifically, do we know who they were, John?
We don't know very much about who they were. And you might ask, well, why not? And it's because in the mystery schools, see, the mystery schools of which we have evidence from antiquity, see, there are the mystery schools that left some evidence, and then there is the long tradition that produced the mystery schools, which goes back probably about 6,000 BC. And we have very scant evidence of that. This is the picture that I've been able to put together. There was an order founded by a community of seers and shamans, both men and women, founded in northern Iran near the on the Urmian Plateau, which was called the Magian Order, Magian. And the Magian Order carried this story, it carried this sacred intel that I'm sharing with you now, which eventually came down into the Nag Hammadi writings. And so the mystery schools and the tradition of spiritual learning that produced the Nag Hammadi came from the Magian order, okay? A very ancient order. Now, there was a rule among the teachers of the Magian order, and that rule was taken up by the authors of the Nag Hammadi material. It's a rule of anonymity. That is to say that they carried a responsibility to teach humanity about its own origins and to teach us our true story of who we are and where we came from. And in that, they chose to remain anonymous. They did not want to take credit upon themselves for carrying this story. They wanted the story to speak for itself. The Sophianic planetary story is the divine birthright of humanity, and it belongs to all of us. So it can't be attributed to a single person, and they were very careful about that. So that's why you find almost no mention of the names of these teachers. There's maybe half a dozen or a dozen names mentioned, and we don't really know, who they were. Hypatia is the most famous name from that tradition.
Whoever they may be, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the calls. James in Kansas City, Kansas. First-time caller. James, you're on with John Lash. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you this evening, gentlemen?
Good.
I wanted to ask your guest how this correlated with the Gnostic Gospels and their assertion that Sophia mothered a beast which was called Yaldabaoth, that is proclaimed to be the Lord of this world and the God of the Jews.
Who wants to be the Lord of this world, but is actually not the Lord of this world. This question is a great question because it brings us back to this point of the archons, George. Remember, I was saying there are three aspects to that profile of the archons, and I didn't get to the third one.
That's right.
Well, the gentleman caller just brought up the third one. Now, this is a scoop. Are you ready? Fasten your seatbelt, because I guarantee you nobody has ever said before on your program what I'm going to say now.
All right, here we go.
And in answer to the caller, thank you very much. And also, my disclaimer, what I'm going to tell you now is not John Lash's idea, okay? It is taken from the Coptic Nag Hammadi materials. The myth of the Aeon Sophia, the divine Sophia, who is our mother, who designed the human species in the galactic center, says that when she came out of the galactic center, this is called the fall of the wisdom goddess, and when she accidentally entered the realm of the galactic limbs where these planetary experiments arise, she impacted the matter of the galactic limbs in such a way that she actually accidentally produced a bizarre alien species called the Archons.
Really? Interesting.
And so it is actually our very Earth Mother who produced us, who also produced the Archons by an accident, by a cosmic accident. And one of those things was that she actually accidentally produced this draconic monster. They gave it a name. They called it Yaldabaoth. It's a draconic, archontic monster that lives in the solar system, probably on Saturn, if you would say that's its headquarters. I think Saturn is the headquarters of the Archons. You know? You brought up that word, Dracon, and I thought I'd get back to it, George, because you mentioned it.
Yeah. Now, I think the devil may have been one of these things.
Yeah, well, the devil is this figure, Yaldabaoth. It is the reptilian overlord of the Archons. That's the exact definition. That's his profile. And what the Gnostics, or what the heretics of the mystery schools said that caused them to be targeted and murdered and eliminated was that they came out to the early Christian ideologues and the teachers of Christianity, and they said, oh, by the way, we'd like to point out something to you, if you don't mind. We belong to a tradition of shamanic investigators who have been working for many centuries together in teams, and we came to the conclusion that this entity that you call Jehovah, who is the supreme father god of your new religion, is actually a demented reptilian alien working against humanity. That is exactly what the story says.
Where are these Archons now, John?
These Archons now inhabit the solar system. They inhabit the solar system, and that is their proper realm. They belong in the solar system. They constructed the solar system. But the solar system, please bear this in mind, apart from the sun, moon, and earth. They did not construct the sun, which is called Sabaoth in the Greek Coptic materials that the calling guest is citing. Sabaoth, the sun. And the Archons were given the task by Sophia herself to occupy themselves by creating a kind of theme park, because they were an annoyance to her. She is a goddess from the Pleromic center, from the highest realm of divinity. She didn't expect to accidentally produce these critters. And so she gave them the task to occupy themselves by producing a planetary system. So they are the engineers and inhabitants of the inorganic part of the solar system. You know, science tells us that the solar system consists of an inorganic and an organic part, which are interlocked. Have you ever considered that picture?
That is an interesting picture. I haven't considered it, though.
As a matter of fact, these seers who wrote the Nag Hammadis really regarded the Earth as not part of the solar system. Why not? Because the Earth is a living organism. It's alive. It's the body of Sophia herself. It's the body of our divine cosmic mother. And so the Earth is alive, the Earth is organic, the moon is part of the organic system of the Earth, and so is the sun. But the other planets are inorganic. So in fact, what we have in the solar system is an organic system of three bodies captured in an inorganic system. And this is a serious problem in cosmic affairs. But Sophia herself is the source of this problem. Am I getting this across clearly?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
So one thing I want to warn people out there, those of you who hear anybody but me using the word archon, you want to ask this question. For instance, Jay Widener, a colleague of mine, uses the word archon. You want to ask this question: does Jay Widener, who uses that term, tell you what the Coptic materials say about the origin of the archons? No, it doesn't. This is the problem, and David Icke doesn't either. So they're taking the term out of the sacred intel of the mysteries, but they're not giving you the background of the term. And that is so important, because unless you know the background of the term, unless you know the whole story, you're not going to be able to see how we're going to deal with these archons.
Let's go to Alan, Atlanta, Georgia. Go ahead, Alan. Thanks for calling.
One, does this man think that Jesus himself was actually, when he talked about the Holy Spirit, was talking about Gaia herself, which I actually now believe might be the case. And the other one is the Roswell dissection tapes, which I actually know somebody whose his grandfather was in charge of the dissection.
Oh, you're not talking about the one that Fox showed, right?
Well, actually, the Roswell dissection of the aliens, they were actually found not to breathe oxygen in the same levels as we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if he might believe that maybe what's going on now could be terraforming for the archons to come to this planet, and maybe Gaia's getting a little PO'd about it.
All right. And why don't you rephrase that first question, Alan, just so we understand it more?
Yes, concerning Jesus.
Do you believe that Jesus might have been talking about the Holy Spirit and not insulting her, being the Gaia herself? And maybe that Jesus might have been created for that purpose, to let us know that if we're with her, we can also create other worlds.
Well, that would be a great way to consider Jesus. There are thousands of ways to consider Jesus. And but, there are some clues to the sacred intel of the mysteries. Very few, but there are some in the New Testament. And some people have, speculated that Jesus might have been, a heretic or a Gnostic or something like that. I don't want to necessarily go down that rabbit hole, but I will say that, yes, there are mystics. Even the great astronomer, Johannes Kepler himself, who was a mystic and an astrologer as well as an astronomer, said that the Holy Spirit is Sophia, that is to say, the living earth. And also, you find that same assertion in some of the ancient materials of the Nag Hammadi writings. Now, as far as the aliens, archons, terraforming the earth, this is the crucial piece of technique when you think about the archons. When you think about the archons, you always have to think very carefully about what they would like you to think they do and what they actually do. So it's rather like dealing with any authority, or dealing with the NSA or FEMA or any authority or ruler. Anybody who wants to have power over you. This could be the local town preacher,
Sure.
That individual will want you to think that they have more power over you than they actually and really have. That's the art of deception. That's the art of stealing your power. So I would say that the ancient seers of the mysteries warned us about the deception of the archons. They actually called them angeloi of deception, angels of deception, messengers of deception, because angeloi means the messenger, of course. So you want to be very, very careful. Sure, I'll tell you my scoop, my hit, The archons who live outside the earth can't live here. Even if they ravage the earth, they would have to ravage the whole planet and lower the oxygen content to under 10% for them to take over this planet. And even then, they would be destroying the very habitat that they wish to conquer. And so their agenda is very aggressive and vicious in regard to humanity and the earth, but it's a dead-end agenda. It's absurd. And you're right, Sophia is reacting, and she is providing a way to protect humanity against this archonic menace. That's what the GNE is about. It's about understanding how we can turn this experiment around.
Well, let me tell you one thing, John. Fascinating theories indeed. I want to talk with you a little bit about the Draconians when we come back in just a minute.
Sure.
Would you give your website out for us, John, or how people can
Sure. The
track
website
you?
that contains my commentaries and writings on the Nag Hammadi material and the ancient mysteries is metahistory.org. Okay? META history. And then the teaching site for the Gaia navigation experiment is gaiaspora.org.
Super. We're going to come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM with John Lash. And welcome back. John Lash with us, of course, and we're going to take your calls. John, how did these ancients know this? How did they understand all this?
Well, they understood it through the development of faculties that they have, which we today would call paranormal faculties.
Mm-hmm.
Clairvoyance, clairaudience, the ability to remote view. There's an enormous amount of talk about these paranormal faculties, right? You've had many guests on your show who actually concentrate on that subject. The thing to understand about the seers of the mystery schools is that they didn't work as individuals, because they realized that an individual with its own, even if it develops its own psychic and paranormal faculties, will have a difficult time verifying their investigations. There's a danger of going into fantasy with these faculties, or there's a danger of receiving information that you don't know how to interpret correctly. So they worked in teams. They worked in groups of 2, 4, 8, and 16 over long generations, and various teams passed on the torch of the knowledge that they were developing by shamanic investigation to the succeeding generations. And so what you have, if you look at that picture over a long trajectory of time, you have an intelligence community working in teams, concentrating continually on the same questions. What is human purpose? What is the purpose of this experiment we're in? Who created this experiment? Where did the archonic intrusion come from? What can we do about it? They continually repeated these questions, and working in teams, they developed this sacred intel. But they did it with the very same faculties that every single person listening to me has. Inherently, we as human beings are endowed with these abilities, and we need to use them intelligently and in a sober and disciplined way, and not recklessly. But were we to do so, were we to train ourselves to use them and to do it together and compare each other's findings, then we would be on the same path that these ancient seers were on before our time.
How do you feel about all the various religions?
I think there's a big problem with religion on this planet, and I know that I take a risk of looking bad when I diss religion or when I attack it. But just let me say this. If all of those people listening to me who consider themselves to be religious, whether Protestant or Catholic, believe in the spirit of coexistence, then wouldn't you say that the very least that any true religion can do, if it claims to be a path of peace and love, would be to allow coexistence? Wouldn't you say that's the minimum requirement?
Probably, yeah.
So then I would say, okay, you allow me to coexist. Allow the Sophianic message of the mysteries to coexist. Allow it to be known, celebrated, discussed. It has been repressed for 1,600 years. Allow it to come out. Allow it to coexist alongside Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, and then see what people choose. see if they would choose the way of Sophia, who is the planetary animal mother, and see if they would choose to follow her story and to live in the beauty and power of her presence. We haven't had that opportunity, and that's one of the reasons why humanity has gone so far down the drain.
Let's go to Lorene in Sacramento, California. Hello, Lorene. Go ahead.
Hi, George. John?
Hi.
I think you almost answered my question. I wanted to know how the Judeo-Christian religion played into the hands of the archons to help.
It is both the evidence and an instrument of the archons, and that's not my interpretation, my friend. It is my way of stating what is found in the warnings of the Nag Hammadi materials.
Yeah,
some of the Nag Hammadi writings explicitly warn against the Jehovah as a false alien god. They're explicit about that.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
But how does that play into the hands of the archons, how they can control us with that?
Well, you see, the archons are frustrated about something. They really can't come down here and land and take us over and enslave us like in some science fiction movie or War of the Worlds. They have to achieve a victory over humanity if they
divide us, and that's the way they conquer, right?
By remote control. They have to do it by remote control. They fight proxy wars. Does that remind you of any other enemies that fight proxy wars?
Yeah, many do.
The archons fight proxy wars. It's a classic mind control trick of the Catholic Church is that they warn humanity, oh, watch out for those demons, be careful of demons, or we'll come and exorcise you, or you must do the Mass to protect you from demons. But they are actually the instruments of the most demonic forces on the planet themselves. The shamans of the mysteries were the first ones to point out, like I said before in the first hour, that Judeo-Christian religion, including Catholicism, is the instrument of archonic deceit working into the human mind. And we're now in a battle. Religion is a battleground, and we are in the culminating stage of the battle between the lovers of Sophia and humanity and Yaldabaoth, the reptilian alien god. This is what is actually transpiring on the planet as I speak.
Let's go to another quick call. Running out of time here. First-time caller, Brett in Baltimore. Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, George.
Hi.
And Jonathan. I guess this actually plays into a few things that you were saying. I guess the archons and how they use the Christian church to deceive us and distract us.
That's right.
How they portray the pagan deity Baphomet as the devil.
That's right.
But my question is, the pagan deity Baphomet actually appeared to me, materialized in front of me, in that sort of religious position that you would see the Virgin Mary or Jesus posing in with
Sure.
2 fingers up and 2 fingers down, and
Sure.
with his legs crossed.
Sure.
Just sort of floating there, looking at me, and it really just changed the way I think about everything. And I was wondering what you think about that.
Well, the Gnostic scholar Hugh Schoenfeld decoded the word Baphomet. You can go read the Passover plot where he describes this. That was a momentous achievement in scholarship of the mysteries. And he showed that the word Baphomet is a coded form of the word Sophia. So what Baphomet is, that animal pan image that is wrongly equated with the devil or Satan, represents the animal powers of the Earth Mother herself, the animal powers of Sophia. So I would say that what you had was a projection into your imagination of a very powerful and benevolent force of the Earth itself, and that was a very fortunate experience for you.
Okay, next up, Xander in Manhattan. We'll squeeze you in here. Go ahead.
How you doing? How you doing, sir? I wanted to ask you about the word pagan and where does it come from and its basic modern origin.
Sure. Very happy for that question. Good way to conclude the interview. I call myself a pagan. Pagan comes from the Latin root paganus, which means country, a country dweller, somebody who lives in the country. And I am a pagan for the fact that I live in the country. That's a literal definition. The more advanced definition means that a pagan is someone who sees the divinity of the natural world. Therefore, I do not look outside this world for divinity or even for my connection to divinity. I find it in nature. I find nature to be animated and filled with divine presence. Someone who sees and meets the divine presence in nature, that is a pagan. And who reveres and respects nature and puts humanity in the frame of nature, that is a pagan.
Why is this so controversial, John?
Well, because when Christianity took over and suppressed the ancient mystery schools, it had to demonize the knowledge that they had in order to make people reject it. Because the knowledge that I am sharing with you of the Sophianic message is so beautiful, compelling, and so obviously makes sense that in order to get people to reject it, they couldn't get people to reject it by argument or persuasion. They had to demonize it. And so the word pagan was turned into a word that was meant someone who had no morals, who had no sexual boundaries, and worse, who performed human sacrifice and worshipped all kinds of evil demons. You see, it's a demonization of something that is essential for human survival. And that demonization has caused us to go insane. The influence of religion is to turn humanity toward insanity, but the Sophianic message leads back to sanity.
John, great job again. John Lash, all his information at coasttocoastam.com. For Nathan Staton, Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lone Hood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Borles, George Knapp, John B. Wells, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell. I'm George Noory, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.